I have so many questions for you. I think I'm going to start. I've been reading a lot lately, Doctor, about these strains, these variants. And I guess what a lot of people ask me all the time is they say, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Because now we have the vaccine and the media seems to be drilling us with this idea that it's not over and it's never going to end.
Right. New strains arise in viruses constantly. Grace, some viruses are even more prolific at mutating than others. Coronaviruses are considered to be not necessarily the most prone, but because this has been such a fast-moving pandemic, and it's a new virus basically to the human population, it's not surprising that you're going to see variations arise. And indeed, we've seen that since the beginning of the pandemic. And interestingly enough, of course, they tend to be given names that reflect their geographic origins, and nobody gives a hoot unless you call it the Wuhan virus. But that's a story perhaps for another time. But should we be worried about these new strains? Generally speaking, the answer seems to have been no. Some of them have been found to spread more rapidly as they're tracked. And when we think about these things, of course, we also have to recognize that the way in which we test, the way in which we trace, the way in which we monitor or surveil these things also has been something less than perfect. But the upshot seems to be that none of these strains have proven to be significantly more virulent or deadly, let's say, than the initial ones that made their way into the human population. So in a sense, we don't want viruses to be deadly at all, but that in and of itself is good news. And prior exposure to other strains means that if we should contract an infection with a new strain, and you can, it won't make you as sick in all likelihood because your immune system will have some recognition of the virus. There are enough similarities. So you should get vaccinated. The current vaccines will definitely mitigate the course of illness for any strain that we can reasonably foresee, let's say. And it shouldn't be cause for excessive fear. So I'm a proponent for resuming life in full, opening up, because the holistic damage that's been caused by locking down and by that mentality of fear is ugly indeed, and the consequences are certainly showing in many ways that we really want to mitigate and end as soon as possible.
I'm speaking with Dr. Nan Hayworth. She was the first female MD to serve a full term as a member of Congress. And my next question for you, Doctor, is speaking of mitigating this and starting to get life back on track here, Dr. Fauci seems to be on the news all the time. He's really become the voice of, fear for a lot of people. Or some people think he's a hero. Some people think he's, just spreading panic porn. But my question for you is, he talks a lot about masks, and now he's saying maybe wear 2 or 3. And when I talk to other doctors, people have very differing opinions on how effective these masks are and how good it is to be wearing one all the time. What's your take on that?
It's a great question, Grace, and here's how I view it. If you want to protect yourself, it's a very reasonable thing to do. I don't deride or criticize anyone for wanting to wear a mask, but if you're going to wear a mask, wear it the way a health provider does. Wear an N95 type mask with that filter function and make sure that it's completely sealed around your face. And, that's something that's not trivial. Most folks who wear, if you go outside wearing a standard surgical mask or a cloth mask, most of them aren't fitted so that all breath goes in and out of the mask exclusively. But that's actually what you want to do if you really want to protect yourself. And in that case, yes, masks work. Here's our challenge. Early on in the pandemic, First, of course, there was all kinds of, and I, look, I'm forgiving everybody for the fog of war, if you will, for the fog of pandemic in those first weeks.
Yes.
There was a torrent of information. There was conflicting information. We didn't have, the supply of N95 type masks that now we do, and that's to be expected. There's a demand for it. Yay, now we have supply. However, early on, a few weeks in, after the don't bother wearing a mask phase, and Dr. Fauci was part of that, but again, I'm going to give him amnesty on that. Then it became everybody should wear a mask because when you wear a mask, other person, you protect me, right?
Right.
So it became, when I wear a mask, it's an act of care for public health, for other people, and folks have not necessarily, understandably, Grace, they've seized onto that. So that has created this new opportunity to have an authoritarian state dictating to us, and people feel entitled to go up to other people and say, you are putting me at risk, and getting very fearful and getting very hysterical because you are not wearing a mask, right?
Right.
So I think the message has to be at this point, look, we've got more than enough supply to make sure that anybody who wants to protect him or herself can wear a mask effectively and protect himself. No one else around you needs to wear a mask if they don't want to. And I think you have to have that message, and public health authorities have to promote that message. And, I think especially on the left, a lot of reluctance. Obviously, Dr. Fauci, whom the left has embraced, and I think the main reason they embraced him is because he seemed to not necessarily think all that highly of President Trump, and I think that's why he was embraced by the left. But that's the message that they need to propound, Grace, and they're not doing it so far. And aside from that, if you're not wearing a mask that way, the protection that you afford yourself or others is limited. And when you have mask mandates, like I was just in an airport about a month ago, and there was an airline employee sitting there not wearing a mask, waiting to get on a plane. Well, in all federal facilities, all airports, you were supposed to have a mask on full time, right? Now, am I supposed to go find the nearest security officer and say, hey, this guy's not wearing a mask? I really don't want to be in that position. It is completely impractical, and yet it is a mandate. There's actually a law enforcement consequence. That's where it all gets ridiculous. Most people are not wearing masks in such a way that they're going to be fully effective anyway. Is there harm in wearing a mask all day? Is there harm in wearing an N95 all day? No, I think, for most folks, this is not going to be an issue unless you're prone to panic. Or you really, 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 have a lot of, respiratory tract issues that maybe, you just need your face to be unencumbered. For most of us, it's not a problem, but I don't think we should have to do that unless, as I say, we really specifically want to protect ourselves. And, then fine, I respect that.
To your point, doctor, sometimes I'll go into the grocery store and I won't have a mask on me. And there's a young guy there. I see him all the time. And I'll walk over to him and say, can I have a mask? And he says, yes. And he goes and gets it and he hands it to me. And I'm just thinking to myself, none of this makes any sense. Now he's handing me a mask and we're closer than we even had to be. So I totally understand what you mean with that. But the last thing I wanted to ask you before we let you go is your thoughts on the border crisis. I know that you are pretty outspoken about the situation that's happening on our southern border. Anything you want to say about that?
Well, apropos of what we were just talking about, Grace, people who have tested positive for COVID, and of course the testing is incomplete at the border, so let's start with that. They are handling such a flood of immigrants, and this is entirely due to Biden administration policy. This is a crisis that was manufactured by the Biden administration, but they don't have enough testing for all the aspirants, and they're releasing people into our border states, into Texas, for example, who have active COVID and, basically hoping that local facilities can cope. Now, given that it is the left that has had far more of the COVID fear-mongering, the lockdown mentality, and all the rest of it, isn't it remarkable that they are tolerant now of this massive new influx of COVID-infected people into our border states?
Exactly. And there's going to, doctor, there's going to be there's going to be a spike and you're going to start hearing about all the spikes. I hate to cut you off, Doctor, because I love having you on and I hope to have you on again soon, but we do have to go. If you guys want to follow Dr. Hayworth, go to @Nan Hayworth on Twitter, Nan Hayworth. She has great tweets and you can follow along and see where she's appearing. She does a lot of TV hits as well. Thank you, Doctor. We really appreciate it. The Biden administration's policies and executive orders are already causing some economic disturbance. Tax laws are going to change. Your tax burden on selling real estate will grow. Don't get caught flat-footed and squander the equity in your real estate built up over years or even decades. Sell today with J.J. Manning. For over 40 years, J.J. Manning has been the leading auction house in New England. From high-end homes to estates to commercial properties throughout New England, J.J. Manning can get your property sold fast and contingency-free. There is a big reason why Mass Lawyers Weekly voted J.J. Manning #1 for 4 consecutive years in a row, because they have a huge following of bidders who pay cash. When you sell with a broker, you pay the commission, but in an auction, the buyer pays. These are treacherous times in the real estate market. Some sectors are at all-time highs. Others are losing ground. Don't wait until Joe Biden destroys this sector of the economy too before you cash out. To learn more on how to get your property sold fast, contact Charlie Gill at jjmanning.com. With over 16,000 sales and satisfied clients, you can be the next one. Call them today at 1-800-521-0111 or go to jjmanning.com and get your property sold. We'll be back on the other side with more of your calls, 844-500-4242. This is The Grace Curley Show.